his message, it changed radically, completely. And although he died what we would consider to be prematurely, we know that nothing is premature in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when Malcolm passed away, non-Muslims and Muslims alike grieved for him. In fact, there was a gentleman by the name of, who's an Afro-American movie star. His name is Ossie Davis. He wrote the obituary for Malcolm. And in the obituary of Malcolm, because he loved Malcolm, as many non-Muslims loved Malcolm, he said, and this is at the end of his obituary, he said, they said that Malcolm was an extremist. They said that Malcolm was a fanatic. They said that Malcolm preached hatred. They said that Malcolm preached violence. He says, but I never knew Malcolm to involve himself in violence. I never knew Malcolm to curse. I knew Malcolm as a man, you understand me, that treated his wife and his children with the most honor that anyone have ever seen any Afro-Caribbean, Afro-American man treat a wife. And he says, I knew Malcolm as a gentleman. I knew Malcolm as a scholar. I knew Malcolm as a person who reformed human beings and who touched human beings even without physically touching them. He says, have you ever met Malcolm? Had you ever had him smile at you? Did you ever hear Malcolm say anything which was wrong towards anybody? Of course, Malcolm was a strong speaker and he spoke his word. But he says, would any of you been courageous enough to have admitted that you were wrong after 15 years of following something that you were committed to? Would you have admitted that openly? Would any of you would have continued even when you knew that you were going to die and that people were conspiring against you? Malcolm died without a house. Malcolm died without a car. Malcolm died only with 2 suits of clothes in his closet. Malcolm died with no bank account. Malcolm died without a job. Malcolm died preaching what he had understood. Malcolm, what he understood, what Elijah Muhammad told him, was a dedicated soldier. And when he understood that was wrong, when he understood what was right, Malcolm died as a dedicated soldier. What I remember about El-Hajj Malik Shabazz in just those 2 months was that he gave his life for what he understood. Now, don't get me wrong. Malcolm probably didn't memorize the Fatiha. He didn't know any fiqh. He didn't know any tafsir. He didn't know what is aqidah. He didn't know the Arabic language. He didn't read anything from the seerah. He didn't know what was Sahih al-Bukhari. He probably didn't know the etiquettes of the wudu, the ghusl, and the other things that we Muslims take for granted. But I say to you that his heart contained the faith and the conviction and the sacrifice of 1,000 people who knew all of those things. Because at that age, in that time, there was not 1,000 real Muslims that we knew of that could have done what Malcolm did, what El-Hajj Malik did. So I'm saying this only to say to you people who are living in a second generation, another generation, coming from a totally different background, that you need to ask your own selves. You were born with the Quran in your mouths, most of you. You were born speaking Arabic, many of you. You were born understanding the parameters of Islam, even if you didn't practice it. You were understanding about the mosque and understanding what is halal and haram, and you were born with Muslim names, and you were given all the advantages. But I ask you today, would you be willing to display the kind of commitment and the sacrifice that Malcolm was willing to do so, not for himself, not for his family, but for the next generations that would come, that they would receive a certain amount of respect and dignity only because of the sacrifice that I made. So I believe that El-Hajj Malik Shabazz deserves to be considered one of the reformers of this century. I don't say the reformer, no, because we know that A reformer, from an Islamic standpoint of view, requires something different in terms of knowledge and stature among even the scholars and the students of knowledge and Islamic work, and has to be authenticated in some way by his contemporaries and by what he has acquired in terms of knowledge and fiqh and understanding and Islamic organization. But a vehicle, the most sophisticated vehicle, if it didn't have a spark. You see, if you had outside the latest Mercedes, BMW, or what's the most expensive car in Europe? A Ferrari. You had a beautiful one outside with no battery in it. You would go nowhere. It would sit there and it would rot. Malcolm was that spark. And there are sons and daughters and grandsons of Malcolm, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, in America today, who are the ones that are reshaping the American society when it comes to Afro-Caribbeans and when it comes to American Europeans and other people who have settled in America. There is no Muslim in America who does not, at some point of his time, of day or week or month, that doesn't think of El-Hajj Malik Shabazz and the sacrifice that he made because he was a pioneer. And I'm saying this to you that you should also give credit to the people who made those kinds of sacrifices, because the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah will never recognize and give mercy to the people who themselves don't have mercy and do not recognize and are grateful for those who do things for them. So if you are grateful for what other people have sacrificed on your behalf, even though you didn't meet them, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have mercy upon you, and Allah will also appreciate your sacrifice. Just to give you an idea of the stature of the man, not what Khalid says, because I'm a bit subjective. I consider myself to be one of the sons, spiritually, or from a mentor point of view. I consider myself to be one of the spiritual sons of Malcolm, in the sense that he inspired all of us, not by his personality, but by his commitment. So I'm a bit subjective, but let me tell you what others have said. The autobiography of El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, better known to the people as Malcolm X, and his lectures are in nearly every library in the world. You cannot go to a major city. I've been to 37 countries. I've been to 159 cities around the world in the last 20 years. I've never visited a library or an institution. And I will guarantee you that this university right here, there's an autobiography of El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, in the library right here. You cannot find hardly any university or any institution anywhere in the world that does not have a copy of his autobiography. Why? Because it is required reading. He met and advised 7 heads of state. Can you imagine that? A man of his lowly social development, coming through the prisons and drug dealing, prostitution, and so forth and so on, coming out of the prisons and so forth. Just after he left Mecca, he met 7 heads of state. That means 7 heads, 7 countries, their heads of state honored this man to receive him in that month and a half. He is honored each year by more than 14 countries. More than 14 countries in the world have a day called Malcolm X Day. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in the prison himself, he said that he was inspired by the reading of the autobiography of Malcolm and his lectures. He said it sustained him at times when he doubted himself. And when Nelson Mandela came out of prison after 27 years and with the help of Allah and colleagues abolished 240 years of apartheid in South Africa, he said, part of my strength and my commitment is owed to Malcolm X. And even in the film Malcolm X, Spike Lee went to Nelson Mandela and asked him to appear in that film, if any of you have seen it. And he did so, quoting Malcolm X. He is also considered by many intellectuals, heads of states,